Welcome to the Self-Reliant Living Show, where we talk all about a self-reliant lifestyle to save money, live greener, eat healthier, and be prepared for anything so you can take care of the ones you love in good times and bad. I'm your host, Jennifer Osech, a homeschooling mom of 3 boys. I'm the author of the Preparedness Planner series, and my husband and I are the lead teachers of Self-Reliant School, a website dedicated to giving you the skills and confidence to take care of yourself and your community. Be sure to stop by and pick up your free videos from inside Self-Reliant School that will get you started growing, cooking, and preserving your own food today. You can pick these up at selfreliantschool.com/free. Now, on with the show. Okay, so again, welcome to the Self-Reliant Living Show. And I see everybody's coming in. Hi, Joy. Hi, Shelly. And if I'm looking down, I'm monitoring your questions. And if I'm looking forward, I've got my notes there. And of course, we also have a guest. So I'm looking all over the place, but rest assured that I am totally engaged in what's going on here because, like I said, I love this community. Okay, so I have a special announcement, like I said, about iTunes. And we are having a giveaway. Okay, so the number 1 prize is an Excalibur dehydrator. We are giving away an Excalibur dehydrator. It's valued at $350, and that is our first prize. Our second prize is a Presto canner, and that is valued at $85. And then our third prize is a Mr. Coffee brewer/grinder, and that is valued at $45. And so later in the show, I'm going to be telling you how to enter that giveaway for those prizes. Right now, I am going to welcome our guest. Her name is Joanne Moser, and she is the author of Mason Jar Nation. I love that name, that title. And I'm just going to go ahead and read her bio. I always like to read bios because I don't want to get anything wrong. Okay, so Joanne Moser is a graduate of Hamline University, that's in St. Paul, Minnesota, and she holds an MFA degree in creative writing. Besides being a writer, she's also a photographer. She's a DIYer and has been a featured blogger on the DIY design community Curbly.com for the past 10 years. Her fiction writing has appeared in such periodicals as Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine, wow, and she's currently working on a young adult novel entitled Making News. So welcome, Joanne.
Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Okay, so we're just going to kind of dive in here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your passion for all things DIY?
Well, a little bit about myself. I live in Minnesota, and I actually was born and raised in North Dakota. And my parents were products of the Depression. So like a lot of people that had parents of that age, we were very self-reliant. Dad fixed everything before it was, we didn't throw out anything. We didn't replace anything if we didn't have to. So he fixed it. If it was broken, Mom sewed, she baked, she canned, she cooked. Bread in a plastic sleeve was like the last resort. You know what I mean? So it was, every week was baked bread. So that's kind of where it all started with my mom and dad.
Wow. Okay, so I love that because you and I are, I don't want to give away ages, but my parents had similar experiences. So I totally get that, and I was raised in a similar way. What made you decide to write this jar? I mean, this jar, listen to me, I've got jars on my mind. Oh, I just love them so much. What made you decide to write this book? Because the thing is that, it's like to a lot of people, it's just kind of a mundane object. But to those of us that love mason jars, it's a little bit more. Like I said, I have this addiction. But what made you decide to write this book?
Well, I hate to break it to you, but it wasn't actually my idea. It was my editor's idea, Mark Johansson from Cool Springs Press. I did some work for them, some technical editing a couple of years ago. And then he had this idea for a book about mason jars. And he just needed somebody to write it and do everything. So He got in touch with me, and plus he knew my work through Curbly, so he was familiar with that. And so he got in contact with me about a year and a half ago and said, "Hey, I have this idea. Would you like to write it?" And I said, "Sure." So that's how it started. And the great name is that was Mark's idea too. That was its name from the beginning. So I'd love to take credit, but I can't take credit for that.
Yeah. Well, it's just, yeah, it's a wonderful name. And I assume that since you had the name to begin with, that maybe shaped a little bit of what's inside of it. So can you give us a brief history of mason jars and some of the ways they have changed our nation?
Well, mason jars in the beginning, before they were mason jars, they were called fruit jars. I guess collectors still call them fruit jars because it's more inclusive, because there's plenty of jars out there. But it all started, as far as the canning process started, that started in around 1795 in France with a gentleman named Nicholas Appert. And that was because Napoleon needed some way to feed his army. And he kind of put out this call for someone to come up with a way to do that. And Appert worked quite a long time. And he came up with this system or this process called apparitizing, which was named after him. And it was basically canning. And his jars were very rudimentary. They were glass with just stoppers. And he closed them with corks, basically. That's it. You know, a cork and a batten. He would knock that cork in there, boil them, and boil the jars and their contents, and that was it. And he thought that the canning process, or the reason why his the things that he canned preserved, was because air didn't get into the jars themselves. He was not aware of, pasteurization. That took Louis Pasteur to tell us, to elucidate everyone as to why boiling actually worked, to preserve that food. And then, but it wasn't until, as far as mason jars is concerned, it wasn't until 1858 when John Mason filed his patent for the mason jar that we know of today. And his contribution to the mason jar design was actually something called a disappearing or a vanishing thread. Mm-hmm. And if I have some jars right here, and if you look at your beloved mason jars, you'll see that there's a thread that kind of it begins right before the lip and it disappears right before the bead. Mm-hmm. And that closure in itself was able to actually perfect the hermetic seal. Was it the best hermetic seal? No, but it was it was leaps and bounds better than a cork. Mm-hmm. And then when Mason did develop this particular cap, this vanishing thread cap, the opal glass that we see in the top of these antique or vintage caps, that wasn't there. It was just all zinc. And the problem with that is the zinc made the contents inside the jar taste really bad. So people didn't really can much when Mason first came out with his jars. It wasn't until 1869 or so when Louis Boyd filed a patent and put this opal glass, this milk glass, inside the top of the cap, and that protected the food from getting in contact with the zinc. Oh, wow. It was better.
Yeah.
Then after Mason filed a bunch of patents in 1858. They expired around 1870. That's when all fruit jar manufacturers kind of swooped in and started making mason jars and put Mason's name on every brand you could think of. Mm-hmm. They hijacked his name. Mm-hmm. And then the Ball brothers got into the jar making business around 1880, and in Buffalo, New York, and they manufactured for 2 years. They manufactured jars called Buffalo jars, and I happen to have an example. This is a replica. I don't know if you can see it, and it's it's the amber color, and that's what it looked like. It was it was, Ball Brothers Glass Manufacturing Company. So it's a a different logo than we know now. That jar was only manufactured for a couple of years because the factory burnt down, which makes that particular jar very collectible, one of the most collectible that you could possibly, if you can't come across one, it's kind of like winning the lottery. So anyway, the factory burnt down in and around 1888, I believe, and then they moved to Muncie, Indiana, and that's where things really went crazy for the Ball brothers. They just made millions and millions of jars. In 1905, they made like almost 74 million jars. That's in 1 year. So that's how many, how much canning was going on in that during that time. It wasn't until about 1915 when Alexander Kerr made that two-part that everybody knows now. It's the disc and the ring. That's he invented that, and that's when it wasn't really until then that canning became kind of a more in-home process. Before then, it was difficult. It was a long process. I shouldn't say that. Everybody's grandma did canning, it seemed like, and they did use these old, this is one of my grandmother's old caps. But it really took off then when it became easier. The opal glass, when Boyd did that helped. It just really gained popularity. And then everybody in every homemaker in the United States was canning. And with the advent of World War I, of course, rationing, people self-rationed, that was huge. World War II, the same thing. Of course, people were expected to ration. And that just exploded both the jar industry and also the steamer. What's the thing called? The steamer thing.
The pressure canner?
Pressure cooker. There you go. The pressure cookers, just like the sale of them went through the roof. And that's because people were growing victory gardens and then, canning their produce. So,
Well, so that leads me to the next question. What if we are collecting them, because I have a suspicion that a lot of people watching this video, this show, are probably collectors or maybe kind of want to at least know a little bit about collecting. So can you give us a little bit of information about things we should look for if we just happen to find, a whole bunch of mason jars sitting on the curbside somewhere? How do we know those are really good or really not good?
Well, color is always going to be prized. The Aqua, the Ball brothers, because they made so many, they're not as collectible as we wish they would be. They're more sentimental as far as the sentimental value is there for me. My grandmother's Ball jars, I have them, I love them. They're priceless to me. If you should happen to discover one of these amber jars, you want to make sure you guard this with your life. This, like I said, this is a reproduction, and even the reproductions. This was made in 1976 for the bicentennial. I think that was kind of the deal. Even these are quite collectible. These are worth more than like the original. These Ball, the Aqua Ball blue jars. But if you should find jars that have an interesting closure, like a bail or a clasp or some sort of a clip, those are more collectible because they broke. Those glass covers broke, and you could. And my friend John, who is a avid collector, who has a priceless collection of fruit jars, that's his specialty. So to find a jar with the original glass cover intact with some sort of clip or bail or something like that, that's very that's unique, so you want to keep your eyes out for something like that.
So that would be a really good find.
Yeah, that would be a very good find. Also, color is like violet, more desirable, the light yellow, that sort of thing. And jars actually those particular jars that are those colors were actually clear when they were manufactured. They turned those colors because the glass manufacturers put a decolorant in them. So, like before World War One, they used manganese, and when that is exposed to extreme heat or ultraviolet light, meaning sun, it turns violet, like a light, very pale violet, watery violet. It's a beautiful color. After World War One, their supply of manganese dried up, which was coming from Germany. So they switched to selenium, and that turns the jars yellow. So if you happen to have an amethyst colored jar, it was probably manufactured before World War One. If it's yellow, it would have probably been manufactured after World War One. So color is really, people desire color, those odd closures, and also, by the way, things with errors. If the bulb, there's quite a few ball jars that have errors, and that a lot of them have to do with the perfect, like perfect Mason, like the E is backwards, or there's two T's, or there's just these very weird things. So anything you find out of the ordinary, keep an eye out for that, for sure.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I had no idea about the colors, but that is a really great way to keep those straight as to when they were made. That's great information. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about the mason jar projects that are in your book?
Well, I try to include a lot of things, a lot of variety. So there's crafts, there's garden projects, there's kitchen projects, like storage, and even a few very easy, adaptable recipes. I am not a cook, so I'll just throw that out there right now. These are very easy. Storage, and then lighting. Lanterns, and actually electrical. We did some wiring. I did some wiring and made some lamps that way as well. So I tried to cover a lot of bases.
Okay, so which project is your favorite?
Oh, and people have asked this before, and every time I think later, I'm like, wait a minute, that other one was my favorite. But there's a lot. I have a couple on my desk right here. I have a jar that I turned into a music box. I just used the musical innards of a music box from the secondhand store, and then filled it with just memorabilia from a vacation from northern Minnesota, as a matter of fact. So I love that. I made a squirrel feeder that's enjoyable to watch. Even if you don't like squirrels, it's it's fun to watch them just be so active and eat those nuts out of that squirrel feeder. There's a lucky bamboo water garden, a lion's paw lamp. I also made this one actually I shocked myself. I didn't think this was going to turn out. It's a swizzle stick pop-up thing, so you hold your.
Wow.
But yeah. So I try to, some of the projects are literally, you can get them done in minutes. Mm-hmm. Others, you're going to have to exercise your DIY muscles just a little bit. But I wanted a nice variety, so.
Okay, so this book is about mason jars. Do you cover canning at all in this book?
Oh, no, we thought, my editor and I did talk about that, but we decided that because I'm not a cook, I didn't want to kill anybody. So I didn't want to worry about botulism or anything like that. So
yeah. Well, that's good to know. Okay, so I wanted to say that one of the reasons that I love this book is that, because you see all these projects all over the internet, all over Pinterest and things, and they are painting the jars and making, kind of covering them up. And I really love the fact that most of your projects, I don't think any of them actually cover it up with paint or make them look like something they're not. Was that intentional?
Yes, but there's only one painted project in there. But I thought, it's like painting a jar is painting a jar. You can, if people would want to do that, they can do that. They can apply that technique to just about any of the other projects in the book. But yeah, they're beautiful, especially, like the embossing is beautiful. The older jars, just when you start learning the history of how they were made, it was an art form. It's still an art form when you see people blowing glass, that sort of thing. That's the way they made jars back then. There was a guy, and blowing that glass. So to cover them up seems a shame, you
Yeah,
know.
I
To,
agree. I agree. That was so you did a great job with that. So,
thanks.
what about older jars? And now I know that we're not going to take any of those jars that, were made before World War I or anything like that and take them and use these as part of the project. So, at least I hope not, because that would be a shame. But there are some older jars out there, they've been used over and over again for actually canning. Is there any kind of precautions that we should take, but, when we go to make something out of those jars as opposed to like a new jar?
The only, just if you're storing foodstuffs in them, maybe, dry goods, that's fine. If the lip of a jar is chipped or something, I use your best discretion. Canning, I would, encourage, although I'm not a cook, I would probably not encourage anyone to use a chipped jar, a jar that's chipped on the lip for canning. As far as the crafts are concerned, whatever, no, really, there's nothing to hold back as far as using, those old jars, except if you're going to cut them, because there's a few of the projects in the book that where I use a bottle cutter. There's only a handful, but they are in there. And the reason that I don't care to use the older jars is not only because they're worth a little bit more money or whatever, is because the glass is quite thick and it's harder to cut than a newer jar. And also, speaking of cutting jars, the embossing is kind of difficult too. So when you cut if you're going to cut a fruit jar, mason jar, you want to avoid the embossing or use a jar that doesn't have embossing at all, which you can buy these. That's what this one is, this music box or music jar. It has no embossing.
Okay.
So those are perfect, especially when you're first starting out cutting bottles or jars. Find ones that don't have any embossing or very light embossing, or if you can avoid the embossing altogether. But otherwise, if you want to use an old jar to, if you're not going to manipulate it in any way, you can still use those old jars, those even collectible jars, for some of the projects in the book.
Okay. Well, that leads me to ask you, because there's some really easy projects in here, but like you said, there's a few that require a glass cutter. And you talked about that a little bit just now about, okay, well, these are the things you need to look for if you're going to use a glass cutter. But I just wanted to ask you, as a DIYer, how difficult is it to cut glass? Because we think of that and we're like, oh my gosh, or am I going to chip the glass or break the glass? What are some steps that you recommend starting out with that?
Oh, well, cutting glass of any kind, like wine bottle projects are huge on Pinterest as well. There is a little bit of a learning curve. So that's why you want to start out with maybe not the thickest jar or bottle, like as far as in wine bottle world, maybe not a champagne bottle, those thick jars or bottles like that. So, but really, it just takes a little practice. I mean, a smooth jar, even if you would like to practice on a mayonnaise jar, that sort of thing, that's, I would suggest that's where you start. And then move up to something maybe a little trickier if it has some light embossing, or if you can avoid the embossing altogether. But really, cutting glass, it sounds tricky, but with the right cutter, with a little bit of practice, it's kind of surprising the first few times you do it, especially the first time you get a really successful one where it breaks perfectly. It's kind of almost a miracle that it breaks exactly where you want it to. It's just exactly perfect. It's like, wow, that actually worked. But it does. It's fine. Yes, you can cut a mason jar. So.
Okay. So what are some favorite ways of yours to use mason jars besides canning? And I mean, do you use them like for storage and that sort of thing, or just use them for crafts? Can you talk about, because you say you don't can, so do you use them like just for dry storage or other kinds of storage? I know I do, but I'd just love to hear ideas about how other people use them.
I do. I use them for dry storage a lot. I use them for craft supplies, little things, that I don't, something to contain those little craft supplies in the bathroom, Q-tips or cotton balls, that sort of thing. And I was thinking about this earlier, and it reminded me of a story when I was a little kid. I was probably second grade, and my mom was actually the janitor at my school. And she came in and she was cleaning the school. It was a tiny school, and she came in to clean the school one night or one evening after after school, and she had made chocolate chip cookies that day, and she brought in for me to have a snack after school because I was still there. She brought in some chocolate chip cookies, and she brought in a mason jar of cold milk. And I remember that. It was like, that's right. It was like, that's right. When we would go, like, even take a drive, like instead of now you grab a thermos or whatever, she would use a mason jar. So, yeah. So, yes, I mean, they come in, they're just incredibly handy, from the kitchen to the craft room to the even out in the shop, in the tool shop with nuts and bolts and just about anything else that you can think of. And the great thing about them is they're pretty to look at, so they're not just another funny looking container or piece of plastic or whatever. And as for foodstuffs, you don't have to worry about PBA or anything like that. So they're just incredibly handy.
Yes. Yeah, I put everything in mason jars. It's like the commercial, if it fits, it ships. Well, here, if it fits in the mason jar, it stores.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us, Joanne. It's just been an absolute pleasure to talk about mason jars and to have you on.
Good. Thanks for having me. And it was my pleasure.
Okay, so now I'm going to tell you guys how to get a chance to win that Excalibur dehydrator or the canner or the coffee brewer grinder. And that is, what you can do is you can go to Self-Reliant Living. No, I'm sorry, I got the wrong URL, but I'm going to have all of these in the show notes, so rest assured they will be there. But if you go to selfreliantschool.com/iTunes and leave a review of this show, the Self-Reliant Living Show, then after you click the subscribe button, of course, leave an honest review. And then if you go back to selfreliantschool.com/giveaway, then all you need to do is fill out that form, and it's just that easy. It's just like two steps, and then you can be entered to win one of those three prizes, the top one being an Excalibur dehydrator, the second one being a Presto canner, so that would be a pressure canner, and then the coffee grinder maker/grinder, because I know that a lot of us who dehydrate like to grind up and make our own powders. So you need to hurry though, because that giveaway is going to end on October 12th at 2016. So hurry and go over there. Like I said, the links will be above this video or beneath, depending on where you're viewing it. So good luck, and I hope to see you guys over there, because like I said, I will be announcing the winner through email, and so I will look forward to sending out those emails. And we're also going to have daily prizes, because I have a big grab bag. It's actually sitting over here, and I'm going to take out one thing per day, and you will be entered if you have entered this contest already, and then we will be also emailing those winners out as well. So again, head on over to selfreliantschool.com/giveaway. Got it right this time. And like I said, that link is going to be in the show notes or above or below this video, depending on where you're viewing it. So go ahead and click on that. And if you are interested in Joanne's book, learning more about it, you will find all the links in the show notes. So if you are just watching, just tuning in, maybe you came in the middle of this show, I am Jennifer Osuch, and I am the host of this show, the Self-Reliant Living Show, and we have been talking to Joanne Moser. She is the author of Mason Jar Nation. I have that book right here. I'm trying to get it where you guys can see it. It is an awesome book that has a bunch of DIY projects for mason jars. So be sure and check that out on the show notes page. So with that being said, remember, being self-reliant is not selfish. It's not just about you. It's about taking care of yourself so you can take care of those that you love. Take care until we talk again. I'm so glad you could join me today. Here's what to do next. Head over to selfreliantlife.tv to pick up the show notes for this episode and to watch replays of older episodes. To go directly to the show notes for this episode, go to selfreliantlife.tv and then without a space, type a slash and then the number of today's episode. You can watch this show live every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, live on Facebook or the Periscope app. Don't forget to stop by selfreliantschool.com/free to get your free Self-Reliant School videos that will help you get started living a self-reliant life. Also, if you're listening to this show as a podcast and you've liked what you've heard today, please subscribe through Stitcher, iTunes, or your favorite podcast app. If you're on a mobile device, just search for the Self-Reliant Living Show. If you're on a laptop or desktop, just go to selfreliantlife.tv/iTunes. And while you're there, please leave a review. I love to hear from you. You leaving feedback makes it easier for others that are interested in living a self-reliant life to find my podcast. Take care until we talk again.